This Memorial Day weekend proved its officers' sacrifice to keep the city safe. Chicago was completely open for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic began during Memorial Day. The city welcomed hundreds of thousands of residents and visitors for more than 40 different events across the city. Homicides and shootings are down in the city of Chicago. Homicides are down 8.53%. Shootings are down 15.91%. I'll say that again. Homicides and shootings are down in the city of Chicago. Homicides are down 8.53%, and shootings are down 15.9%. In the neighborhoods that we are all focused on with our whole of government approach on the south and west sides that has historically experienced the highest levels of violence, homicides are down 30%. And shootings are down 34%. So in our whole of government program on the south and west sides that experience over half the violence in the city, homicides are down 30% and shootings are down 34%. In addition, officers have taken 4,631 illegally possessed guns off the streets of Chicago so far this year. That is on pace for last year's record 12,000 guns that were taken off the street. That number includes 9 guns that were recovered from a recent gun trafficking investigation on the south side. That months-long operation resulted in the arrest of Devon, that's D-E-V-O-N, Dow, D-O-W, a reputed ghost gun seller and manufacturer who is now facing federal charges. Gun arrests and gun recoveries were up 69% and 41% respectively over the weekend. Just yesterday alone, Chicago police officers took 75 guns just in one day, just yesterday. Officers also made 154 gun arrests and recovered 250 guns over this Memorial Day weekend. Officers also made 13 arrests on North Avenue Beach, where they also seized 11 guns, thanks to our enhanced security protocols. Since the beginning of the year, officers have made 572 total carjacking-related arrests. Chicago's dedicated task force also worked hard in the neighborhoods and with federal agencies and federal partners on our joint vehicular hijacking task force missions. Our Bureau detectives are ahead of last year's pace, where last year we recorded a 19-year record of homicides cleared, having already cleared 139 cases. On our CTA, since we added more resources in the past 27 days, CTA crime is down 10% these last 27 days since we've added additional resources. Chicago Police Department is committed to making Chicago safer through visibility, engagement, and collaboration. And we're doing this through our 5-part strategic plan, which includes enhancing public safety, growing community trust, strengthening investigations, promoting officer wellness, and making transformational change through reform. I'm going to pass the podium over to Rich Guidus, and then he'll hand it over to Ken Meyer, and then I'll come back to go through some notable arrests that we made over the weekend, and then I'll answer a few questions. Rich.
Superintendent, and good afternoon. With 240 square miles to monitor and protect over the 3-day holiday weekend, the Office of Emergency Management and Communications coordinated public safety efforts in the Central Business District, the Lakefront, and in our neighborhoods. The unofficial start of summer in Chicago was one of the busiest on record, with an increase in outdoor events with approximately, we'll just say about 60 events, known events going on throughout the city. This included the new Sueños Festival in Grant Park, Coldplay concert at Soldier Field, Crosstown Classic at Guaranteed Rate, a doubleheader at Wrigley Field, the city's Memorial Day Parade, Chicago's 22 beaches opening, and a multitude of events and street festivals. Since January, OEMC held 15 planning meetings around Memorial Day weekend, attended by multiple city departments, including Chicago Police Department, Fire Department, to ensure we had plans in place to handle the additional crowds and increased traffic around the large events, as well as to ensure the public safety of residents and visitors. To amplify our efforts to protect residents and communities citywide, OEMC and the Chicago Police Department once again activated the Summer Operations Center over the long weekend. Located at OEMC, the SOC provides strategic oversight and coordinated citywide deployment of public safety personnel and assets to enhance our ongoing collaborative efforts around crime and violence reduction. The SOC will be activated each weekend throughout the summer with the Chicago Police Department, OEMC, as well as key city agencies and strategic partners. Throughout this activation, we conducted multiple daily calls to facilitate information sharing citywide with all necessary agencies. To further enhance our monitoring of citywide events, OEMC also activated the Emergency Operations Center to support the SOC over the 3-day holiday weekend, staffed by representatives from additional city departments and agencies. Throughout the weekend, the EOC offered citywide coordination of services requests, deployed assets, and overall collaboration efforts with local, state, and federal agencies. With events this summer close to pre-pandemic levels, we will be seeing more residents and visitors enjoying the summer weather on the lakefront, Riverwalk, visiting Millennium Park and Navy Pier, attending festivals, baseball and soccer games, as well as neighborhood celebrations. I want to make every effort on behalf of the city to keep our residents and visitors safe. I want everyone to know that they have a role to play as well. I want to remind the public, if you see something, say something. Always be aware of your surroundings, stay connected to family and friends, and report suspicious activity posing an immediate threat by calling 911. Additionally, with beaches open and more people gathering on the lakefront, it is important to know your location when calling 911 to report an incident. Chicago's location identifiers or pole markers serve as an additional tool for emergency personnel and the public to provide their exact location for a rapid response. The city will have resources in place to monitor activities throughout the summer. As always, OEMC urges residents to be cognizant of threatening weather conditions, emergency situations, and to heed messages and alerts from officials. At OEMC, we are in constant contact with a multitude of city and departments, as well as local, state, and federal agencies. We'll continue to monitor events for the purposes of public safety through the Operations Center 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, including twice daily calls just to ensure coordination. I want to wish everyone a safe and enjoyable summer. Thank you. Right now I'd like to bring up Commissioner Ken Meyer from BACP.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Superintendent. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Ken Meyer, and I'm the Commissioner for the Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, otherwise known as BACP. Chicago's businesses are pillars in our communities. They are also crucial partners for the Chicago Police and various city departments. Prior to Memorial Day weekend, I asked our businesses community to be part of the solution when it comes time to making our city safe. I'm here to say we saw strong compliance over this past weekend. However, the few businesses that did not comply, we did not hesitate to issue enforcement. During the Memorial Day weekend, the BACP Nights and Weekends Enforcement Team conducted investigations to ensure businesses were complying with the Chicago Municipal Code. Over the Memorial Day weekend, BACP issued enforcement to 68 businesses. Also, over the weekend, BACP led the Business Compliance Task Force, which is a coordinated multi-agency effort staffed by BACP, the Chicago Police Department, the Chicago Fire Department, and the Chicago Department of Buildings to prevent egregious and dangerous violations. About 1/3 of the weekend investigations were part of this task force. I want to thank the city departments that worked closely with us over the weekend, especially the Chicago Police Department commanders, officers, and the vice unit with the Chicago Police Department. They are allies to our enforcement operations. Thank you, and now I'm turning it back to Superintendent Brown.
I'm going to go through a few notable arrests that we made recently, and then we'll open it up for questions. "38-year-old Andreal Hagler, that's Andreal, Hagler, was arrested on May 25th, 2022, after being identified as the offender responsible for the murder of an 8-year-old girl. She was charged with one felony count of first-degree murder. The victim was found deceased several minutes earlier in the residence in the 4700 block of North Winthrop in the 19th District. Another notable arrest, 53-year-old Travis Cook was arrested on May 24th, 2022, and charged with one felony count of first-degree murder and one felony count of murder with strong probability of death or injury. He was arrested after being identified as the offender who less than 24 hours earlier stabbed a 43-year-old male to death while on the train in the 400 block of South Clinton. Another notable arrest, 42-year-old Dion Jones was arrested on May 24th, 2022 by Chicago Police Department and the Great Lakes Regional Fugitive Task Force and charged with one felony count of attempted first-degree murder and 3 issuances of warrant. He was arrested after being identified as the offender who shot a 41-year-old male multiple times in the 4100 block of West 5th Avenue in the 11th District on September 1st, 2021. Another notable arrest, 28-year-old Luis Molina Jr. was arrested on May 24, 2022 and charged with 5 felony counts of attempted first-degree murder. Molina was arrested after being identified as one of the offenders who opened fire into a vehicle in the 2000 block of South Oakley in the 12th District. 2 individuals inside that vehicle sustained gunshot wounds and 3 others were in the vehicle but uninjured. Another notable arrest, 2 12-year-old offenders were both arrested on May 23, 2022, and both were charged with one felony count of attempted aggravated vehicular hijacking. These 2 12-year-olds were arrested after being identified as the offenders who moments earlier attempted to take a vehicle by force from a 31-year-old female in 3400 block of West Lexington in the 11th District. A 16-year-old male juvenile and 2 17-year-old male juveniles were arrested on May 25, 2022, after being identified as the offenders who took a vehicle by force from a 57-year-old male in the 3000 block of West Sunnyside in the 17th District just minutes earlier. The 3 attempted to flee on foot but were quickly located by responding officers and placed in custody. All 3 were charged with one felony count of vehicular hijacking. One of these 17-year-old male juveniles were also charged with one felony count of possession of a controlled substance and 3 misdemeanor counts of resisting and obstructing a police officer. 47-year-old DeMarlin, that's Demarlin, Brewer, was arrested on May 25, 2022, and charged with one felony count of aggravated criminal sexual assault with a weapon, one felony count of armed robbery with a dangerous weapon, and one felony count of burglary and one misdemeanor count of theft. He was arrested after being identified as the offender who sexually assaulted and robbed a 52-year-old female victim on May 23rd in the 1700 block of North Wales in the 18th District. The offender was charged in connection with a burglary and a theft that occurred on May 23rd, 2022 in the 100 block of West Hubbard, also in the 18th District. A 16-year-old juvenile was arrested by members of Chicago Police Department's Public Transportation Section on May 24th and charged with one felony count of aggravated robbery with a firearm. He was arrested after being identified as the offender who robbed a 23-year-old male offender with a weapon on April 30th, 2022 in the 400 block of East 63rd Street in the 3rd District while on the train. The final arrest that I want to highlight, a 17-year-old male juvenile was arrested by members of Chicago Police Department and the Great Lakes Regional Fugitive Task Force on May 23, 2022, and charged with one felony count of involuntary manslaughter and 2 felony counts of unlawful use of a weapon. He was arrested after being identified as the offender who fired a gun in the 9300 block of South Wallace in the 22nd District, striking a 15-year-old in the head and killing him. That highlights all the notable arrests over this past week for particularly violent crimes. I'll close my comments with this before I take questions. Our work is never done. It's never done. One crime is one too many. Our work is difficult and, yes, complex, but also very, very dangerous. but our results thus far have been highlighted with this hard work. I'll take a few questions.
Hi, Superintendent. This is Bruno, WGN. I just had a question about the 5-part strategic plan. I know you mentioned it on Friday as well, I believe. And there's different things in there. Obviously, there's 5 parts to it. And some of them are more self-explanatory than others, like officer wellness. We understand that. But making transformational change through reform, what does that mean?
So we're under a consent decree, but we're using the consent decree not as a ceiling, but as a floor. And it's been covered by all of you really well. How we started was not desirable. We had really low compliance when we started, almost 3 years ago now. This last reporting period in the consent decree, we were at 72% compliance with the assessed paragraphs. We started with 11% compliance with the assessed paragraphs. So making progress in reform is how you build trust. And it's actually a best practice. It keeps our officers safer and has an impact on reducing crime. So when we talk about transformational change through reform, we're talking not just about compliance with the consent decree, but we're also talking about all the hard work that I highlighted over this past week.
Superintendent Christian for NBC5. Compare last year. We had lower numbers, but of course we were in the pandemic still, which of course not many things were open. But tell me, I'm assuming you looked at that.
I have.
And then looked at this year and more things were open. What kind of things did you do differently, or what did you learn from 2021?
So just to put it in context, we looked at the last decade, Memorial Day weekends, and we were, so most of that decade it was not under the global pandemic, and we were about the same level of violent crime that we've seen over the last decade. There's been years where it's been much higher, and then there's years where it's been slightly lower. We were about on average with the level. Given the number of events, the number of challenges, and the challenges leading up to the Memorial Day weekend, you know, we had an all-hands-on-deck approach, as you know, as we do every year. And one crime is one too many. Obviously, it's much more challenging than we like it to be, but our officers took more guns off the street these past few days than we have on record. I don't know if there's another time where in a single day we've taken 75 guns off the streets of Chicago, and you know, just it was every day. Every day was every stop. Almost everyone had a gun in the car. We took 11 guns off North Avenue Beach. Who takes a gun to the beach? I mean, why do you need a gun to enjoy the beach? So it's been quite a challenge, but we raced to take guns off the street because every gun, every single one taken off the street is a life saved, we believe. It's a deadly force situation avoided. And so we really do take due care in taking as many guns off the street as a top priority for us, given that we're in this gun crisis in this country.
Superintendent Ravi Bajwal with ABC7. A couple of things about staffing. We saw you earlier today at the graduation ceremony. I believe you had 46 graduating.
50.
Oh, now it's 50.
But who's counting?
Well, it was 49, and then it went to 46, so now it's 50. Okay, great. But apparently, like 2 or 3 years ago, we were just doing some number crunching in the newsroom, and it was like in the 200s. Do you have enough officers?
So good news as I was on the way down here, we have a new class starting tomorrow of 100 new recruits. We could always use more officers, but as you know, every police department in this country is struggling to find new recruits. We are on pace to fill our vacancies sooner rather than later. We're challenged with recruiting like every other department. It's the reason why we have to extend our officers' canceled days off much more than we'd like to, given the challenges with this profession, with working every day. You need those off days, but it's much more dangerous on these weekends, as we've highlighted here with the previous question, and we need as many officers on the street as possible to protect not only the residents, but protect the officers that do come to work. So not having enough officers doing violent weekends is very dangerous for the officers that do come to work. So we make a point to have enough officers to cover our backs when we're out there doing the great work for this city.
So on that note, with the Juneteenth weekend coming in, 3 weeks, will officer time off be canceled again? Will it be straight days? Will it be 21-hour days, perhaps, or whatever the number is?
It's bad enough. Don't exaggerate 21-hour days.
I
My
heard
goodness,
21
nobody can work 21-hour days except. But I was just
certainly
saying
11 days in a row for very young people. But what are you expecting for Juneteenth weekend?
I don't know where you get the 11 days in a row. So let's just slow it down a little bit. So before we get to Father's Day weekend, Juneteenth, there's the Puerto Rican Fest. As you recall, last summer we had increased violence during the Puerto Rican Fest, and that was an abbreviated Puerto Rican Fest. We'll have the full, hopefully 3 days where we could spread out all the festivities over 3 days and have less concentrated population trying to enjoy, so we can mitigate some of the things that we have to do as far as traffic control and reducing the level of violence. So to answer your question specifically, we have made quite a bit of changes to our canceled days off. So we just don't blatantly cancel days off. We never cancel vacations or holidays. It is the either 1 day off cancel every 5th week as we approach these very violent weekends. And by the way, it's Memorial Day weekend where we see increased violence. It's Father's Day weekend. It's the 4th of July weekend, and then it's Labor Day weekend. So it's 4 weekends where we have to have extra resources out to ensure our residents are safe, to cover all the events that are being planned, as well as to keep our officers safe with enough backup when they need it. So yes, we'll have some rotation of canceled days off, but we'll do it with peer support, employee assistance in mind, as well as not doing it any longer than we have to. We really do take due care in officer wellness.
Hi, Superintendent.
Hi.
Katie Anthony with the Sun-Times. So much of the violence this weekend happened in areas like the 11th District that are already being flooded with police resources. So are you going to alter your strategy for addressing summer violence based on this weekend? Do you have any plans moving forward of what you'll change?
If you look at the context of Area 4, you're speaking of the 11th District and 10th District and the 15th District, which is the west side. It's had the most significant decline, as I mentioned. Those areas are down more than 30% in homicides and 30% in shootings. You got to look at crime sometimes in a very narrow sense, but don't miss the more broad sense, because you'll miss a deployment or you'll misdiagnose what you need to do with your resources, which are very valuable. So a 30% decline in that area in both homicides and shootings in our whole of government approach, as well as the areas on the south side are experiencing triple-digit declines percentage-wise. So we're continuing and trying to scale our whole of government approach, but don't forget reporting beyond the 3-day weekend and look at the 6 months, nearly almost 6 months, 5 months and some days of significant declines in those areas in our whole of government approach, outpacing the citywide decline of almost 9% in homicides and 15% in shootings. So yes, we always make adjustments, but we'll adjust to scale what's looking early in the year. We got second half of the year to go, 7 more months to go, to see what other adjustments we have to make. But right now, that whole of government approach is yielding lives saved. It really is. I mean, a 30% decline in homicides, real lives being saved with the whole of government approach. It includes social services, mental health, drug treatment, as well as housing, jobs. I mean, it's the whole social service safety net being layered on public safety as part of our strategic plan.
Just a quick follow-up. So with it being kind of the unofficial start to summer in the city, was there anything specific to summer enforcement that you might need to adjust based on this weekend?
This is not within my purview. We need gun reform in this country. 250 guns taken off the streets of Chicago over 3 days. 75 guns in 1 day. We're awash in guns here and in every major city. It's not lost upon me that multiple cities in this country had multiple shootings, high victimization everywhere. And the common denominator, guns. It's the guns. It's past time to get some significant, real gun reform in this country so that we can save lives.
Superintendent Will Lee, Chicago Tribune. I'm going to ask you about two incidents that happened over the weekend. The first was a homicide that happened on the west side. I believe it was 4400 Walton. It was a homicide that turned into a HBT situation.
Oh.
I understand there may be charges coming with that. And the second incident was the incident at North Avenue Beach yesterday. Obviously, in recent weeks, you've been working on trying to, control crowds, especially those by social media. What is your assessment of how things were handled yesterday?
Sure. I'll start with your first question first, if you don't mind. So, the shooting that led to a barricaded person precipitated by a domestic incident. The offender is in custody. If you don't mind, I'll have Chief Dinahan come forward to give you a little status update on that. But it was a domestic it was a shooting precipitated by domestic, and the offender's in custody. But yeah, one person is deceased, family member. One family member killed another family member over personal argument in the family.
How you doing? So this the incident. This was the one. I'm sorry. You said on which on Walton, correct? Sure. So unfortunately, this incident obviously happened on the 29th of May, just after 10 p.m. We had 4 people were shot, one of which was deceased. As the superintendent mentioned, it was a family dispute that occurred for this incident, and one of the offenders that we had in custody. Excuse me, real quick. Let me get to the charging part here. But one of the offenders that we had in custody, we charged on an unrelated case that we also he was wanted for. And he was charged with 3 counts of attempt first-degree murder for that other case. And for the current case that, with all the family members that were in the dispute and that were shot, working closely with the state's attorney's office, but we still have to interview everybody involved to then secure further charges against this one individual and possibly others as well.
And then the North Avenue Beach, Chief McDermott is Chief of Patrol. We had a plan in place based on a couple of social media posts that were later taken down due to our interaction with the poster or influencer. But we still had, obviously people wanted to come out and enjoy the beach, which they should. Had some unruly behavior, and we had resources there anticipating that we'd need them. We had to scale more resources there. And then I'll let Chief McDermott kind of describe the ebb and flow of what we did.
So first, I'd just like to say how proud I am of the way that the officers handled the situation at North Avenue Beach. We did have a significant amount of resources assigned to North Avenue Beach. Once the crowd started growing and we recovered a handful of guns, we scaled up the amount of resources that we sent down to the beach. For the most part, the officers were doing a great job of, protecting the rights of the people that were abiding the law down at the beach. And there were some large groups of not the usual teenagers that show up. They're a little bit older than the crowd that we had in the last couple of weeks. One main incident we had, there's a large group of teenagers playing music and twerking, and at some point they started throwing objects at the police. They were throwing glass bottles, they were throwing glasses. In one case, an officer got hit in the chest with a pineapple, which exploded on his chest and was all over his equipment. After that incident, we implemented a mass arrest. We think we took 3 individuals into custody that were throwing objects at the police. Throughout the night, we continued to recover guns. For the most part, there was no large fights that were breaking out. The crowds, besides the one incident where they were throwing objects at the police, were, for the most part, largely peaceful. But there was personal disputes that would erupt throughout the night, and someone would pull a gun on somebody else, and officers were always on the scene. We had undercovers out on the ground that were calling out the people with the guns. And even at the end of the night, when we had about 75 people left on the beach, we did recover one more gun on an incident where someone pulled a gun on someone else that was in the crowd. So again, I'm just very proud of what the officers did last night. Thank you.
Question? Yes.
Hi, Superintendent Brown. Casey Cronus with Fox 32. The enhanced security at the beaches over the weekend, do you foresee enhancing security every weekend at beaches, or was that just for Memorial Day weekend?
So likely we will have plans in place to scale resources on the beaches at any point, whether that's the weekend or throughout the day, to include our undercovers who give us some clues whether or not crowd is being unruly, or whatever. So we have plans in place to be able to scale up and down as large as we need to, given all the challenges we face. You know, CTA, downtown, neighborhoods, all are in play as far as scaling resources, and we take a lot of due care in how we expend those resources because they're so limited. And so we have to be really careful and not just staging somewhere where there's not likely to have something happen, but being cognizant that at any time things could happen that we don't anticipate.
And then to follow up on the 250 guns recovered over the 3 days, do you know how many of those, if any, were ghost guns?
So I'll get that to you later. I know we had a investigation that yielded, I mentioned in my comments, that did yield some ghost guns, but I'll get you the exact number of ghost guns of the 250.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Megan Hickey, CBS Chicago. Back to the West Side, as by most counts, about half of the shootings happening there over the weekend. Can you talk about particular challenges on the West Side and maybe more about your strategy in those areas?
So I'll back this answer up a little bit more than just focusing on the West Side. If you just characterize the weekend's violence, it was due to personal conflicts being resolved with guns, and that's throughout the city. The West Side violence, personal conflicts. South Side personal conflicts. The little bit of violence we had in other areas of the city, downtown, and other areas, mostly personal conflicts resolved by guns. So the common denominator, again, arguments that happen all the time. If you don't have a gun there, it's just an argument that happens. With a gun in the mix, it leads to someone shooting and sometimes killing the other person they're having an argument with. These are petty arguments. These are not, you did something to me significant that would cause me to feel like my life was threatened. These are petty arguments that someone resolves with pulling a gun and killing or shooting to significantly wound. So West Side, people live on the West Side are no different than anyone else in this city. The violence that we saw there and everywhere else were mostly personal conflicts resolved with guns, arguments, petty arguments, senseless violence, really senseless violence.
Okay. And then can you give your department a grade when it comes to responding to violence this weekend or even preventing violence this weekend?
So what I would say, you know, we roll, I let the 250 guns roll off my lips so easy. That's very dangerous work. So let's see what grade I would give. A for bravery, or A for courage, A for dedication, A for commitment. And I just tell you, it's easy to say, but very hard to do. Running toward danger. These officers ran toward danger all weekend. I mean, they ran toward where they heard shots fired, or they heard a 911 call, raced to a shots fired call. So yeah, A for bravery.
Hi, Superintendent Carmen Vargas with Univision. Would you say that CPD's strategy to prevent violence over the weekend was successful?
What I say was successful. So our approach is a whole of government approach, and I don't be repetitive, but I actually will be. Homicides are down 8%. If you look at all the major cities in the country, there's a handful of cities that are down in homicides. Our shootings are down 15%. So if you say our homicides down and shootings are down, you're talking about a very small number of cities with both homicide and shootings down. Most cities, homicides and shootings are up again They were up in 2020, they were up in 2021, like in Chicago, but they're still up again a third year, and up significantly. So what I would say again, I'm just going to piggyback the answer I gave about what grade do I give our officers. The bravery and courage to do this job, doing what is the most significantly difficult time to be the police. I've been a cop since 1983. There's no other time these past 40 years where policing has been more difficult. Of what we can avoid, I wish we could stop people from arguing and ending the argument with a gun. You know, my hope is that at some point people find some other way to resolve conflict other than using a weapon. A lot of the violence was indoors. Conflicts were indoors, the shooting happened indoors. These were like family, personal things that happen inside a family. So the whole of government approach where people get mental health and likely drug treatment and other resources in the blighted areas that's been disinvested over generations, that's the part where your question is asking police to do all of that to be able to resolve the root causes of violence, which is really the root of your question. You know, how do we resolve the root causes of violence? And if that's on police, you're putting too high a burden on police to resolve poverty and mental health challenges and drug addiction. What the police can do, though, is take guns off the street. And we took more guns off the street, and we do every year, than New York and Los Angeles PD combined. So, again, A for bravery, A for courage, and commitment and dedication. Running toward danger, A+. Any other questions?
So actually, what I meant is, if the goals that you had in mind on Friday's press conference, you think they were met over the weekend?
So, and what I meant is, I said what I said, and for the back of the room, I say it again. A for bravery, A for courage and dedication. Running toward danger, A+. All weekend long, ran toward danger. Of what we can do, we did it better than any other city in the country, which is take guns off the street to hopefully save lives. Thank you. Okay, thanks.
More clarification, because I didn't personally understand it. The thing that was thrown at the officer on the beach, did you say a pine knuckle?
A pineapple.
Oh, pineapple. I didn't catch that at all.
Didn't have a grenade pineapple, but it was like it just burst on the officer's uniform and just spread pineapple juice everywhere.
So just to clarify, there were...
But glass bottles were thrown at officers.
The glass bottles were thrown. There was 13 arrests and 11 guns taken from North Avenue Beach alone. Is that correct?
That's right.
And following the pineapple incident, the arrests started being made.
No, following the glass bottles being thrown at police.
Okay. All right.
Then we made arrests.
Grant.
Yeah, go ahead. Brian wants to clarify.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah.
So there was probably 4 to 5 gun arrests prior to the pineapple being thrown, and they declared a mass arrest. Took a couple individuals into custody from the pineapple incident and the glass bottles being thrown, and then throughout the rest of the night there was another 6 or 7 guns recovered.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.